All right. Well, it is 10 a.m. sharp. So I see some folks popping in and out. So we'll let folks join in as we start the discussion around the AI in the news. Like I said, Nick is here to record, and we'll have that after the fact for folks who maybe joined a little bit later. But so to go ahead and get started, I'd like to discuss, as we usually do, an AI in the news article. And the latest one that just popped up on my newsfeed actually was a LinkedIn article titled "Musicians Pen Warning on the AI Era." So over 200 musical artists, including Katy Perry and Pearl Jam, have signed an open letter to digital platforms, tech companies, and AI developers, warning them to cease the use of artificial intelligence to infringe upon and devalue the rights of human artists. So, this is something that's been going on for some time, although this newsletter is fairly new. But something that I found really interesting was actually one of the main comments on this, which was from someone who said they don't want to hear songs created by AI. The emotional response to a song is deeply human form of connection for them. And I just thought that was really interesting, because I think a lot of times when looking at art, we really connect with the artist and the story behind it. There is some level of humanism that happens there. And I think that was a really interesting call out and something to think about as we move towards, the world of AI. Are we investing our time and money into pieces of art or creations that have been created by humans or by AI? And I think we vote with our time and money and energy. So I just thought that was an interesting call out, and just goes to show that I think AI could be a useful tool in the process of creation, but in the end, there is, a huge human element that I know a lot of people really seek out. And so I just thought that was, something really interesting. And I'd love to hear Steve and Jay, if you have any thoughts on that.
I'll go first, Jay. So yes, thank you, Tally. Great point that you're making, and it was a really good article that you shared. My personal opinion is I have grown up in the technology space. I love innovation. I love the progress, but with progress comes sacrifice. And the challenge with AI, especially in respect of the art form, we're at risk of losing that authenticity, the human element, and especially when it comes to art, that's so kind of critical. And it's interesting to me to kind of watch the evolution of the marketplace and the response that we're seeing, as you just mentioned. I think that it is essential that we establish ground rules, if you will, because I personally would hate to lose that human element. And I think there is something to be said about the comments that you were calling out with regard to how imperative the human element is. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Jay, do you have any thoughts?
Hi, everyone. That's a great start to our conversation, actually. How do we still keep the human at the center of all this AI revolution, right? And let's begin with art, because I know last year there was a lot of, controversy and conversation about the use of AI in the creation of art, like images, right? Like DALL-E and all of these other tools that were being used to generate art, like replicate the Mona Lisa. Can you imagine what it would take for someone to recreate that and have the same emotional experience of actually seeing the real Mona Lisa? Have you ever been to a museum of art and stared at any of these wonderful pieces of art? Like, I'm a big fan of Van Gogh, and I love his Sunflower series. There is an emotional connection to art when you're actually experiencing it in the form it was meant to be experienced. And so for me, when it comes to music as well, I was just thinking about this when Tally posed the question earlier today. Think about listening to Beyonce's Texas Hold'em, which is the Cowboy Carter album that she released, which is like hot fire, right? It's really one of those genre-changing albums in our lifetime. And think about hearing Beyonce, in the AI version of that. I don't think I'd like that. So yeah, no, that's right.
Sorry, Tally. I totally agree, Jay. For me, and I think this is probably the case with most people. To your point, Jay, when you're looking at art in whatever form or listening to art, it's not just the output. Like it's amazing. Oh, how beautiful, or it may sound or look. For me, it's also the connection that we have with the artist and the thought process that I go through around the process that they went through to create that art and to achieve that final output. I think that's a big part of the mystique, a big part of the value that we receive as the audience. So anyway, sorry, Tally, I cut you off.
No, agreed. I love both those points. And I do like the idea of, there is innately, especially with art, something really that speaks to the human, soul, so to speak, and human connection. And I think that's going to tie directly into the theme of today's discussion. So I think that was a great way to kick this off as we let some folks join here. But just to introduce the speakers on this call. So instead of, as you'll see here, Steve Navarro, who is Minder Machines General Manager and Chief Revenue Officer, will be taking the place of Tim, who's our usual co-host for those who listen frequently. He's unable to join today, so Steve will be the fun takeover co-host there. And then we have our guest speaker to delve into today's topic, which is AI for HR and digital transformation. Our guest speaker today is Jay Palaki, and she is the CEO and Chief Gecko at HR Geckos. And Jay, I'm actually going to turn it over to you to share a little bit about HR Geckos and just your experience with AI to date, and just give a little bit of background on HR Geckos and your experience in the AI world.
Well, thank you again, Tally and Tim and Steve, for having me on today's Mind Over Machines Boring AI show. I love the title of your show. As the founder and chief gecko at HR Geckos, I've been an HR professional for over 25 years now. And I've worked in all industries across the board in different roles. And when I first encountered AI, believe it or not, it was not something that I would have thought of AI or something that was related to machine learning or natural language processing. I simply met a robot at, I think it was the SHRM conference in 2011 or 2012. It was IBM's Watson, and he came up to me in the expo. I call him he because he called himself Millennia and Watson. And it asked me what my favorite song was. And I gave it a title from Bollywood, which is a Hindi song. And it brought it up and played it right there in the expo hall for me from its database. That was my very first encounter. I mean, I've had, knowledge of AI growing up. I heard of the chess champion, Garry Kasparov, being beaten by IBM's DeepMind very early on when I was a teenager. And I never paid too much attention to it because, you think of AI as sci-fi. Believe it or not, I think a lot of us still think of it as something out of a sci-fi movie. And through these experiences, as I've built HR Geckos, which is built for HR, it is an AI-powered HR help desk with a chatbot. I've always, thought about how do we keep the human touch at the focus of all this tech we're building. We have a lot of technology coming at us, not just in HR, but in different functions of the business today. And AI has definitely taken over our conscience and conscious. It's everywhere. You go talk to your little nephew. They're playing these Minecraft and Roblox games that are all kind of AI driven, which sometimes scares me, and sometimes I'm like amazed at the things they learn. But yeah, so this the road to AI for me has been full of learning, amazement, fear, a mixed bag of emotions, but I'm loving it so far.
I love that. And I really relate to that as well. I think AI, and that's, I think you call this out as well, the purpose of our show, the Boring AI Show, to bring it down to a quote unquote boring or, real level. I think AI is such a large umbrella term. It can mean so many different things to so many different people, especially how it's talked about in the media. And so I think bringing it down to a digestible way is really important, just to, as we all enter this AI era, just to make sure that we're staying focused on what's actually possible and practical. And so on that note, I'd love to hear, Jay, how you've seen AI transform the HR space. I think that's a great place to kick things off, because every organization at some level has some sort of HR team. And even outside of that, I think that there's a lot of examples of how AI applies to HR that could apply to other teams for folks listening. So I'd love to hear, some more practical applications and how you've seen HR transform that space, or AI transform that space, excuse me.
Great question, Callie, because HR is not one of the functions in a business that's thought of as something that is digitizable, or we do not have a technology first approach when it comes to the HR function, although that's changing rapidly as we speak. I see AI transforming our function in three different ways. When it comes to public relations, HR has a bad rep in every organization I worked at, and it still does. But I think we can use AI to drive our PR efforts better. It can help us draft communication to our employee populations in a very personalized manner. It can help us with candidate and talent acquisition strategies by personalizing the candidate experiences and the onboarding experiences of new hires, as well as the employee experience in general of folks who are in the organization. Two, it's definitely changing the nature of every job. You hear about Amazon employing these robots to do a lot of the jobs in the warehouse. And as HR professionals, we are tasked with studying how, this human-robot kind of collaboration impacts the way we work in a workplace. And believe it or not, even ChatGPT impacts how employees are relating to their jobs today, right? How some of them, of course, are not totally honest, or, making sure their employers know they're using some of these tools to be more productive or efficient, because there's still that fear about using this, or their organizations have not permitted them to use these new technologies. But, there's this huge change that's coming in every job, including HR, that fear, as well as the amazing, productivity gains that we're having with these kind of tools and technology. And thirdly, It's the chatbot revolution. I mean, I see it in my work, how we can target communication to different employee populations, how we can manage our customer service and marketing teams, as well as, our customers, and how personalized all of that is getting with using tools like chatbots in communication and informing our workforce of key announcements or keeping them abreast of policy changes, or even helping them gain access to information in a very transparent and easy and simplified manner. So that's definitely the top 3 things that I think of when I'm looking at how AI is transforming HR today.
I love that. And I know at Mind Machines, we actually have an internal chatbot that we use, and that's really been beneficial from, personalization, personalized content creation to internal policy inquiries, and things of that nature. So I love that call out. I know that's something we're doing at Mind Machines. And Steve, I'm not sure if any other examples come to mind that you've seen either within Mind Machines or that other clients have used or other folks that you're aware of.
I'm sure throughout this conversation, we'll get into more specific kind of use cases and how organizations are indeed applying AI, getting more granular with Jay's commentary, which I totally agree with. What I really appreciate in the moment that we're in now, the moment that I'm referring to is watching the evolution of the marketplace and its receptiveness, where not too long ago, and this even predates the commercialization or the accessibility of ChatGPT, things like AI, and it's not just AI. If you think about RPA, robotic process automation, there's a fear factor that AI technology innovation is going to replace the humans. My point of this is I am seeing and witnessing not only firsthand with clients and dialogue, but even in the written form in these articles that we're reading, that that notion is indeed being recognized and verbalized as myth. The reality is, of course, there is efficiencies and there is value that AI brings, and it does put certain roles or functions at risk, but that does not have to equate to replacing the human. It's a redistribution of humans and leveraging AI like any technology to upskill and enhance the human element and contribution to the organization. So for me, it is, and Tali, as you're mentioning, for Mind Machines, we may be a technology consulting firm, but it's always all about the humans. So I just appreciate that the dust is settling around this notion that AI is going to replace the humans, and we are really focused, the industry as a whole is focused on how do we better leverage artificial intelligence to enhance human productivity and the value that we do bring to an organization. So that's really exciting to me.
No, I love that call out. And I think that highlights, I love how you worded the redistribution of the skill sets within the workforce, because I think there are skills that are specifically human, empathy, problem solving, creativity that AI can't replace. However, using AI to maybe free up an hour of your day, so you don't have to do some sort of manual entry, can really allow you to be more creative and tap into these skill sets that are purely human, which I think is great. And I know, Jay, in the past, we've talked about, why AI in HR is such a good analogy for how we think about digital transformation, because I think it's such a great example of using AI to automate and do some of these more mundane tasks and make processes more efficient to really enhance and empower the humans in your workforce. So I'd love to hear, your thoughts around that. And just human versus AI skill sets in general.
Absolutely. That's a great segue to the rest of our conversation as well, because how do we keep the human at the center of all this technological revolution that's happening around us? And, I'm not the only one saying this. I've asked a lot of our industry thought leaders and leaders that I've met in my work over the past year on how we should be doing this. And the biggest thing that came out from all of these conversations is that we need to be asking and listening to our, colleagues, the folks who are the boots on the ground, who are dealing with these technological changes, and how the changes are impacting their work day in and day out, because they are the ones who can help us actively focus on what kind of impact any of our policies or decisions around implementing new technology in our workplaces has. And so ask questions, ask how it's impacting their lives, ask why they feel this is a big challenge or why it's a great enhancement to their work. And then listen before you take action. I've, seen organizations where technology has been implemented without any kind of, listening architecture in place, like employee forums or even a focus group to find out if this is the right technology and if this is the right time to implement that technology in the workplace. Is our organization even ready to take on this new tech? And is our workforce, at that mental capacity and able to learn this new tech in the time that we want them to get acquainted with this tech and use it? These are really big questions that have always been the center of any technology acquisition in the workplace, but they have not been as robustly implemented as I would have liked them to be. I mean, I've been in workplaces where I've been given the technology and said, here, go implement it. I never had a say in what that tech was, was chosen, who chose it. There were times when there were outgoing employees who had picked the tech and had left the organization, and I was brought on to implement the new tech. And employees had no clue what was going to hit them. They were never kept abreast of what changes were coming their way. Or, we always talk about being this people-first HR function, right? Because the H in HR is human after all. But I think we forget to keep that at the center of any of these discussions that involve technology. So to me, always asking and listening first and then creating, the solution is key to keeping the human at the center of all this conversation.
Kudos to you, Jay. I love that commentary. That is so, look, at the end of the day, when we are implementing any technology, it is, I consider it common sense to include the users, the humans, and it's about adoption and it's about change management. And there's all kinds of best practices and things to include the humans and the user community and things of that nature. But I'll tell you what, I am amazed at how many organizations don't employ those best practices. It's a funny story, kind of funny, but yet not funny. I recently had to walk away from an opportunity because I was told by someone that my audience, my users are going to use this technology because I tell them to use it. I literally, seriously, that was the quote. Because I asked, well, what are we doing about change management and what's the plan? And have you talked to anybody? And because this is going to be pretty disruptive, they're going to use it because I tell them to use it. I had to walk away from that.
Wow.
Fascinating. In today's day and age, come on. what are we talking about here? That's just silliness. But it happens. And so I think it's important that we have shows like this and people like you in the marketplace to help smooth out some of those edges. And it's not going to go away 100%. You're always going to have certain individuals that are kind of muscling their way through it. But you're absolutely right. The takeaway, I think, for everybody is you can't lose sight of the humans. It is to everybody's best interest in all different shapes and sizes to just be considerate, because there are two aspects of what we're talking about, including the humans. One is just overall adoption and efficiency and applies to return on investment and things of that nature. But we are feeling creatures, so why not employ some of the psychology that goes along with humanity? That's my thought.
Love it. Just love it.
No, absolutely. And I think you brought up a good point, Steve and Jay, of bringing your people along, not only, to empower your workforce, but to increase adoption. These tools are only as good as, if they're being used. If they're not being used, you're not going to get the full, return on investment out of it. So, and folks tend to not respond to, you just have to because you have to. There needs to be some more discussion. And I think, Jay, you called out the validation of very real fears. And I think that's something to make sure it's being addressed and not brushed under the carpet, because folks will, leave. They won't want to adopt a tool like that, and then you won't get the real benefits thereafter. So really, really great call outs. I love that. And I guess on that note, I'd be curious, Jay and Steve, is there any, piece of advice or something that sticks out to you that you would give to folks who are maybe just starting or thinking about their AI or digital transformation journey? Yeah.
Well, I'll go first. I've always found that approaching any new technology with a growth mindset, with the learning mindset approach, works really well in everyone's favor. The ones implementing the tech, the ones using the tech, the ones in fear of the tech, everyone. Think of the organization in terms of personas. If you've been in sales or even in IT, think of the different personas using the technology. And think about how each of these individuals can be brought into the conversation by creating a sense of community. For me, community is one of the biggest sources and the best sources of knowledge. Having a colleague going through the same challenges and then having colleagues who have expertise in different areas related to those challenges is really beneficial, especially in a workplace setting where, all of us are grappling with the same kind of challenges related to a particular technology or tool that we're being asked to use. For example, I'll give you a use case. When Excel spreadsheets first became the norm for collecting data in HR, we didn't have great tools in those days. I'm talking about just 15 years ago. And Excel was really a big tool for HR professionals, at least my colleagues. Some of them had never even used it or even opened that part of their Microsoft Office suite. They'd probably used Word here and there, but they'd never used Excel. So we created this learning community in just our HR group across our organization, which we had several different locations across the state of Maryland. And we exchanged information. We didn't have any of these newfangled Slack channels or anything like that to communicate. And it was either phone calls or we met in person or via email, right? Like that mass email that we used to get. But we used to share information. If we learned something new in a particular week that would help us do something quicker, like generate a report quickly, easily, in a much better fashion, we shared that. And it was so helpful to hear that from a colleague than for me to go online or even for me to attend a training class and learn that. And I retained that knowledge better than when I went to a training session outside of the workplace. So, that's my advice. Join a community or create one of your own if you don't have a community that you like or know of. I created a community called the HR Bytes community for all of my friends and people in my little village to share knowledge about all the different tech that's coming at us at lightning speed in the HR workplace. And we're not on any, inaccessible gated fora. We're on LinkedIn and Facebook. It's that easy to form a community, form your own community and share and learn together. I think that's the best advice I've received. And that's the one I'd like to also share.
I think that's a great one, Jay. I can say that with our client base, I would say the most successful organizations adopting AI have done just that. It's not just about creating a steering committee to determine what do we do, what's the business case, and what are the steps that we follow. But creating an environment, as you are describing, a community, a forum to give employees the opportunity to learn from one another, share their experiences, as well as their emotions, their thoughts. So I think that's exceptional. On more of the other side of the fence relative to what I'm seeing as a best practice, and this isn't specific to me or mine or machines. The marketplace is clearly identifying some of these best practices to be aligned. Don't go big, don't start big. Really hone in on a specific use case that is measurable, that is that's attainable, that gains excitement and momentum to demonstrate the return on investment. Because anything that does take time to adopt and mature, you gotta start small and kind of grow upon that. There is some paralysis that is taking place in the market where a lot of these AI initiatives are getting stuck in the pilot phase and not truly being released and built out. Primarily because they just skipped steps in the strategy on the front end of it all to really kind of hone in on some of these particulars that we're talking about. So yeah, that's it might seem a little elementary, but seeing so many organizations skipping those steps, that is my strong recommendation, to start small, be very deliberate about the use case that you are selecting, and maybe even bring in or focus the use case on a department or individuals that are really behind it, because there is something about momentum that does absolutely come into play and impact long-term success.
I usually refer to exactly what you said as how do we make an elephant dance?
Yeah, good one.
We're talking about simplifying all this, right? Like a colleague of mine would say, how do we eat the elephant? And so we had this elephant analogy going because it is definitely not a dinosaur anymore, but smaller than a dinosaur to tackle technology implementation and adoption. But certainly it's still looming large in all of our agendas today. And we really need to take it one step at a time and create that sandbox kind of environment, like you said. Really, really important.
I have a question for you, Jay. I'm curious as it relates to this topic that we're on, like adoption and success, and what is the kind of the path that you follow. Do you have any thoughts or insights on what part of the organization owns AI? And there's a lot of debate. Is it really IT? Is it really technology that we're talking about? Should it be the COO because it's really about operational efficiency? Is it the legal counsel? So I'm just curious. I mean, I think anybody can have opinion. I'm just curious to see what you're seeing in the marketplace.
Well, that's a great question because just last week, there was this whole push for a chief AI officer in every organization.
Yep. That's smart. I think that's brilliant.
An AI executive at the C-suite level apparently is being touted as a position that has tripled in the last 5 years. And, it's up, I think the article said up by 13% in adoption of that particular role in organizations.
Good.
So, yes, there was this push for a chief digital officer about 10 years ago, when there was a lot of new tech coming out.
Yep.
And so a chief AI officer sounds like a great plan because AI is changing so fast. I mean, as we speak, right? Like whatever was implemented last week is no longer the case this week. It's so different. Even when you go on to the commonly used AI tools on the marketplace right now, we definitely need, a strategy to handle this, and maybe a person in an organization who keeps abreast of all of these changes and is able to advise and throw some light on what's happening. They need not be a technical whiz. I don't have a technical background. I only have an HR background, although I've done some technical certifications. But this knowledge of AI is something that anyone can acquire and share with their organization. And so maybe having a centralized role like that is a good thing for organizations today. Great question, though.
Agreed. So not only it is interesting that you mentioned the chief digital officer, because that going back to my comment about just how fascinating it is for us to be living through this. I love it. It's exciting. But you're going back in time where the chief digital officer eventually transformed into chief experience officer and things of that nature. Again, applying this whole notion that it's bigger than just an implementation. It's bigger than just the technology itself. It really deserves an individual to own it and to steer it and be responsible for it. My fear is when you've got multiple parts of the organization owning it, that does not often work out there. But I do believe that it is a cross-functional responsibility. But I agree with you. I think it's best served by having a chief, by having an individual responsible for it. But being inclusive, it can't be a silo. You've got to have legal counsel involved. You've got to have HR involved. You've got to have IT involved. There's especially from a governance standpoint. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
We love that. Yeah, making sure we're bringing everybody along for the ride and thinking about this holistically from the human perspective, HR side, from the security legal perspective, from the technology perspective, from the users doing it, but then having one person who's really the head of this, AI task force that can be the decision maker and kind of take in and digest all of the different perspectives. So yeah, that's a really, really great call out. Well, keeping an eye on time here, and I do want to get over to our wins, but before we jump over there, any last minute thoughts or questions or things we haven't touched on that you think would be great for the audience to hear from Steve or Jay at this point?
Sorry, Steve. I did have a question for both you and Tally, Steve. You did mention you were using an internal chatbot, right? Is there a use case that you can highlight for our audience where it augmented your efficiency as a human to just throw light on how some of this technology is impacting our daily lives?
Oh, you kind of stole the question that I was going to raise to you as well.
I have a crystal ball.
Yes, indeed, very good. I like that. So I was in the same vein that you have. I was going to inquire with you as to like what are some of the business goals and outcomes at a business level that you're finding is the focus for some of your engagements or what you're seeing in the marketplace. We know that generally speaking, the market is the two primary things that we're seeing is using AI to drive revenue, and secondly, to improve operational efficiency / reduce cost. Those are the two kind of predominant business outcomes. For us, and I think this is definitely achievable for most organizations, we use our tool, which we call Katie, as a knowledge base. So especially from my perspective, heading up sales and marketing, it is mission critical that not only my team have access to client stories and successes and case studies and things of that nature, but I want the entire organization, because we all represent the brand. We all have client facing responsibilities. So we're using Katie in one aspect to gain efficiencies and accuracy of the stories that we're telling about our client work and successes and who was involved in the project, as an example. So having that at our fingertips has been amazing. Tally can speak more about it because she was heavily involved in the implementation and build of this, but I can attest because here's the thing, it's not just the speed to get people, team members, the information, which is awesome, but you know what else it does? It reduces the noise for me. Because, and I think other leaders, because if people do have questions, where are they going to go? They're going to go to other humans and ask them. So to be able to kind of cut down on that has been very beneficial to us. Tally, you have any thoughts?
No, absolutely. I think you just hit the nail on the head. In the past, I would have asked somebody, whether it's somebody from senior leadership or who's worked on the project, and say, hey, is there a time we've used technology X? Because I'm, doing some product research. And then there's, a half hour to an hour conversation wasted from both myself and the person I'm speaking to. And then maybe they have to repeat that to somebody else who's also inquiring about that. Whereas now we have all of that information uploaded to our internal large language model that we can simply ask whenever we need. And it's been huge help for new employees as well, as we get new folks in, who are just learning and trying to figure out where information is, and to get backstories and use cases and some, account specific information. They can simply ask the question and get a response, and then, use that for various, text generation, for marketing material or social posts, or, to connect with different potential prospects. So it's been a really, really cool use case for us. And I could go on and on about the different ways we use it. But I think, just having that internal database for knowledge management purposes has been huge in terms of the time that we've saved.
Wonderful. That's a great use of the tech, right? I mean, as long as it's impacting your life and your work in a very positive manner, yay for that technology. There's always this fear of tech replacing us, right? But then if it's augmenting us and making us more efficient and happier at work, like the emotions that you referred to earlier, Steve, a happy workplace bleeds into the rest of your life, right? And how do we utilize the technology to delve into those kind of emotions and foster those emotions in our workplace is also very crucial as we, talk about this new AI revolution. You did ask me about other use cases that HR teams have been experiencing. And, one area that I deal with daily is the transformation of paper-based HR processes to being more digitizable, bringing them into the 21st century, and making that shift towards a people-first HR function rather than being this paper-first HR function, right? I've seen a lot of organizations leverage tools to digitize their processes, not just, PDF a document, but actually digitize the workflow for, say, onboarding a new hire, having access to, company policies and other onboarding relevant processes in one centralized location, accessible from any device anywhere, especially with distributed teams today, has been a game changer for HR teams, because HR teams are usually strapped for resources. We are usually the most underfunded department and the most understaffed department in any organization of any size, and having such tools be there as a resource to augment our work has definitely helped a lot of my HR colleagues take on their role with a lightness in their step like never before, especially after the past few years of dealing with, I don't want to say the word pandemic, but here I am. Hopefully that's the last time I say this during this conversation. But, that whole change in our lives and work lives definitely threw a lot of things out the door. The old, holding on to the old ways of doing things no longer holds us in good stead. So definitely all of these different use cases are great ways of showcasing how AI and other technology has impacted our lives and continues to impact our lives every day.
I'm curious. So totally agree. Thanks for sharing those. I am also curious about your thoughts around using AI in the recruiting process, because there's a lot of debate in the marketplace using AI to scan and prioritize candidates. And I personally am torn with this topic. I love the efficiency because, boy, especially in today's day and age, because we're from the pandemic, we're not, and the remote workforce, we're not bound by a certain geographic kind of territory of recruiting people because it's remote. That unleashes such a huge volume of candidates to consider now. It's not humanly possible to get through all of them. So you need some tools in place, but I don't believe that technology can do as good a job as the human in really deciphering the resume and the application. You know what I mean by that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Great question and a great conversation starter. We can talk for hours about this. Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I've experienced the whole gamut of being a candidate who applied for a job with a paper application, to being a candidate who actually spoke on a video interview, to being a candidate who was assessed by AI. And I can tell you, I've also been on the other side of the spectrum where I have received paper applications. I have reviewed paper applications and resumes. I have interviewed candidates via Zoom and also interviewed candidates by just receiving a video recording of who they are. And believe it or not, before Zoom, there was just that video recording that you could send to folks with a brief intro about who you are as a candidate. And then I've also used assessment centers and other tools, and I've built assessment centers. My background in IO psychology led me to do a lot of that work across the United States, across different industries. To give you a straight answer, to me, this is both a blessing and definitely not something that I like. So the blessing is, hey, it takes down and cuts down the time it takes to review thousands of applications. Definitely, when we had these job boards like Monster and Career Builder, they used to filter and help us filter candidates. And then came the applicant tracking systems that helped us do a better job with filtering candidates through the different criteria that we as recruiters would use. But even then, as a human, you still had to, for me, you still had to read a resume, still had to think about how these different aspects of a candidate related to the job description and the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required to be successful in the job. And when you talk about AI, and I'm reading this book called The Algorithm, how AI decides who gets monitored, hired, promoted, and fired, and why we need to fight back now by Miss Shellman. I don't know how to say her first name. I think it's Hilke. But she wrote this book, and she's an investigative reporter and journalism professor at NYU. I would suggest everyone to read this book. I mean, it is so enlightening on how these algorithms, which are the basis of any AI, by the way, are deciding who gets hired and who gets fired and who gets promoted and who needs to be monitored on the job, right? I mean, as humans, we've failed to do a good job at this. How is this AI going to do a better job? That's the question of the century, I think. And Steve, you asked it. So my answer is, it's great that it's there, but it's... I still am not fully bought on, that being used 100% to be an accurate tool and an accurate assessment of a human candidate. I mean, I really, as a recruiter in my former life, I never agreed with my own assessment sometimes and had other recruiters review my work. So how is this AI going to do a better job than a human? I mean, there are certain aspects to it that can be done in a better way, like, the filtering and using certain criteria. Definitely, yes, awesome. But making that final decision, I wouldn't trust the AI to do that. Never.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think for me anyway, and I think you would agree, there are certainly a volume of, in this example, resumes that you receive that are absolutely not qualified. So to use a tool to help weed that out is a productive use of the tool. But to the point that you are making, you can't rely on the tool to make the decision for you, if you know what I mean. You've got to just leverage what you can to kind of be more efficient. But in my opinion, it is the human that really makes the magic work.
Yeah, I would definitely caution that use case. I know that there's an article and I'll share it after the fact of Amazon using that. It's, we want to be really careful with the inherent biases of certain data sets. So it's always good to question and understand how everything functions. But definitely, obviously increasing efficiency and making sure that the human has time to even go through all these resumes. So it's really that balance. It's a great call out. Well, as we wrap up here, I'd love to jump into our wins for the day. So, as mentioned, we like to end each podcast on a positive note. So Jay, I'd love to turn it to you and hear what your positive AI win is for the day.
Well, believe it or not, I got my electric toothbrush to work, so yay. But yeah, my AI win, I've used ChatGPT very cautiously ever since it was introduced. But, it's being integrated with a lot of the tools that sometimes we use in our work. So we have a few new members on our team who do a lot of our digital marketing and social media work. So when it comes to content generation, of course, it's really increased the speed at which my team members are able to generate content. But at the same time, there are a lot of things in the content that need to be monitored, corrected, supervised by me. So we are keeping our brand voice the way we want our customers and prospects to hear it and view it. And so my win is I got Canva, which has a magic tool, which is an integration of a tool similar to Dolly and ChatGPT, to actually generate an image of a gecko, HR Geckos, of a gecko on skating on a surfboard, and listening to a podcast about HR technology. And I could generate that image quite successfully for our HR Bytes podcast, season 4 of which is going to release next month. So that's my win. Yeah,
I love that. And I can't wait to see. I'll have to connect with you after so we can share that image in the comments here, because I think that's super fun and I want our audience to be able to see that. Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Steve, what about you? Any positive news today?
Yes. So, one, I'd like to piggyback on Jay's commentary about using AI to author content, whether it be art or the written form. One, I think it's invaluable. Again, keeping in mind all of the things that we've already talked about, that the human needs to be involved. You got to fact check things of that nature. But here's the real point that I'm making: is so valuable to just use it to get started, because the biggest challenge that most people are not very good writers, so they struggle with just getting that first sentence or first paragraph crafted. It's a game changer. So much so that in our world, we have to respond to RFPs, requests for proposals. So Tim Culp and I, not too long ago, we were crunched. We received an RFP. We did not have time to really dedicate ourselves to it. So we leveraged, at this point, Jasper AI to help us craft a lot of the content. Clearly, we used our canned content around our methodologies and things of that nature. But just the wordsmithing and coming up with the executive summary and things of that nature, it dramatically reduced the amount of time that we really need to put in as humans. And we actually ended up winning that proposal. So that was wonderful, because they probably cut our human time, I bet 50%. If not more. It was wonderful.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing that, Steve, because I think that's something hopefully a lot of folks on this call can relate to. I know I can. Writer's block is a thing. And as soon as you have a piece that you can edit, it all starts looking. But a blank page it can be really challenging to just get going. So I love that example. And what a fun win.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, my win for the day is it's a little teaser. So we will be having a shift here shortly in terms of the format of the Boring AI show, moving more towards a podcast format. In addition, there's going to be an exciting Boring AI show event where it's going to be a little bit more participatory for those listening. So please keep your eyes peeled for some upcoming announcements that you should see within the next week or two. And then tune in for the Boring AI show on the 19th to learn more about these two major updates. So very, very exciting stuff. And I think that hopefully this will be something that a lot of folks will get value out of. So more to come shortly, but definitely keep your eyes and ears peeled. Right. Well, I think that this was a great episode. And Jay, thank you so much for joining us. And Steve, thank you for taking over as Tim here as the co-host. I think this was a really, really interesting discussion. And per usual, we will have the recording released hopefully next week for those who missed it and are interested or want to re-listen to any parts of this. Be sure to stay tuned.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Tally and Steve and Tim. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Indeed. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Great job, Tally.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.